Patricia, the floor is yours. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you very much, Huda and Netta. I'm really very honored to speak at this conference. I thank you for the invitation, and I'm moved because I think your conference expresses your resilience, your courage, your determination to influence the course of history in troubled times, and COVID-19 is increasing the trouble. You will share your experiences, your doubts, your different truths, but also your visions and hope for a common future of understanding, sustainable peace, economic and social development benefiting all. I congratulate you with all my heart, and I wish you a very fruitful meeting. I know from my experience that women getting together can move the world. I'll link 3 issues that support your aims: gender-based violence against women, the Women, Peace and Security Agenda based on Resolution 1325, and the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. First, gender-based violence, as we all know, it is to be found in all society, whether in peacetime or going through an armed conflict, whether the armed conflict is internal or international. And it affects women in all fields of life, in the public life and in the private life. Domestic violence in the form of physical or sexual violence, psychological violence, is experienced by at least a third of women, and depending on situations and countries, up to 70% of women experience this form of violence. They also experience the violence at work, politics, and education, for instance. And violence represents the most frequent violations of women's human rights, dignity, and autonomy. Now, the occurrence of a conflict increases the structural violence that pre-existed in a country. Militarization of society with increased circulation and use of arms exposes women to a much higher risk of living through violence, and that is through the participants of the conflict on both sides, and some of whom use sexual violence as a weapon of war and to destroy communities. But conflicts also increase the domestic violence against women because of the frustration, because of the tensions that the conflicts create in society. Women human rights defenders, we have seen in the CEDAW committee, are particularly in danger, including from their own communities, because they are seen as violating the gender roles assigned to them by society. Violence against women is also, as we all know, prohibited by international human rights law as a form of discrimination against women. It can also constitute torture or other forms of cruel, inhuman, or degraded treatment prohibited by the UN Anti-Torture Convention. It is, for women, the main security risk that they live through. And I regret to say that most states still neglect their duty of creating safe lives for women. In conflict situations, violence has this effect on women, but it represents also a main security risk for the whole of the community because it destroys the possibility of peace. Violence against women in conflict situation has been addressed by the Security Council in its resolution 1325 and in following resolutions. And I want to mention here also the Sustainable Development Goals that also attempt to eliminate gender-based violence and to ensure peace. And I'll try and link the two, starting with the Women, Peace and Security Agenda based on this resolution of the Security Council. As Miriam said, it brought important changes, and it treats women not as victims in need of solely a humanitarian response, but as active agents in their societies. It recognizes that they must be full participants in the prevention and resolution of conflicts and sustainable peace building. And it approaches a substantive, it adopts a substantive approach to gender equality and recognizes that the absence of women at the negotiating table means failure of peace efforts. Scientific studies have proven this point. They analyzed in detail a large number of peace negotiations and compared them. The results are convincing and they are fascinating. When women are involved as negotiators, mediators, and signatories, the negotiations have a higher chance of succeeding. So the first phase, negotiation. Then the peace agreements have a higher chance of being sustainable. And third, these peace agreements have a higher chance of being implemented at the local level, which is where things become concrete. And the reason for that is that they address the causes that initially created the conflict. Colombia is an impressive example. In 2016, a peace agreement was signed between the government and the Marxist guerrilla organization called the FARC, that is the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. 50 years of conflict had killed over 220,000 people and displaced almost 70 million. The level of violence was extreme, again, on both sides, and extreme against women, of course. Women's organizations played an essential role as initiators and supporters of the process and then of its implementation. Yet, at the beginning of the process, there was only one woman out of 20 negotiators. Under pressure and strong pressure of women's organizations, there were finally 33% women negotiators in Colombia. 20% were on the government side and 43% on the FARC side. The link between women negotiators and women's organizations was fundamental. Thanks to them, issues that would have been neglected, such as gender equality, dealing with the past violence against women and preventing it for the future, and land rights, were part of the peace agreement. Women's inclusion made the peace agreement a forward-looking document. It addressed the reasons for which the conflict started and lasted and proposed solutions, ensuring participation in politics, economic and social rights, and disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. I believe the inclusion of these themes is a central element for the success of efforts to bring an end to a conflict and to enable sustainable peace. Colombia has illustrated the positive impact of women's organization in launching the peace process, but one needs more, as the slowing or the present stalling of the Colombia peace process shows. In order for those processes to succeed in the long run, I am convinced that women need to participate equally in decision-making at the national, regional, and local levels. Parity is 50-50%, or at least a minimum quota of 40% of each sex is progressively recognized at the international level as a key component of democracy. So it's not enough to have the right to vote, you have to be able to decide. At the same time, the Sustainable Development Goals adopted in 2015 link completely gender equality, elimination of violence against women, economic and social development, peace and good government, and request all states to take measures to attain the goals by 2030. And one of the measures is adoption of a national action plan. I believe these national action plans for the women and security, the peace and security agenda, and the SDGs must be strongly linked and coordinated at the national, regional, and local level. The NAPs for women, peace, and security and for the SDGs must guarantee that women and other underrepresented groups will participate in all decision-making organs in politics, such as parliament, government, the civil service, the justice system, the security system, army, police, intelligence services, in the health and education systems, and also in the media and the private sector. For this, you need changes to constitutions, to organic laws, or to other legislation to ensure the parity and to thus bring change in power relationships. National action plans should also indicate clearly which state institutions are responsible for what, in which deadline, with which monitoring and evaluation, and with which resources. And I insist on the resources. They must be defined clearly. They must be secured, long-term financed. Investing for peace and economic and social justice is much less costly than protracted armed conflicts. In view of the role that women organizations have played and are playing in peace building and sustainable peace, states should also support them financially. They should create a favorable environment for their advocacy and work with full respect for civil and political rights, such as freedom of opinion, expression, assembly, and manifestation. In conclusion, the dynamics between women within the various state organs and in women's organizations could bring change unimaginable so far, thanks to the inclusion of the voices that have been silenced until now and of the fundamental issues of justice, representation, power sharing, and economic, social, and cultural rights seen in a gender perspective. I thank you.